Gettysburg is a community in southern Pennsylvania that is famous as the site of the Battle of Gettysburg, one of the most important battles of the American Civil War. Gettysburg is one of Pennsylvania's small municipal communities that are classified as boroughs. The battle began on July 1. A Confederate division searching for badly needed shoes encountered the Union cavalry northwest of Gettysburg. Although the Confederate troops outnumbered the Union cavalry, the Union soldiers were still able to delay the Confederates while both sides were sent for reinforcements. The Union's General Winfield S. Hancock reported to General George G. Meade that they had concentrated at Gettysburg after the attacks of both Unions, which had failed. General Robert E. Lee decided to attack the Union center on July 3rd. That morning, a horrible battle had occurred. The Union artillery blasted its attackers. The assault had been largely broken up and disorganized. This failed charge ended the major action at Gettysburg. About 2 hours after the fighting began, Union General John Reynolds arrived with his infantry. Reynolds, a highly regarded general, whom Lincoln had earlier considered as a candidate to replace Hooker, he was killed shortly after arriving at the battlefield.
Throughout the evening of July 1st and the morning of July 2nd of the Battle of Gettysburg, most of the reinforcements for both armies arrived on the battlefield. The first day of the battle, the Confederates were able to push the Union forces through Gettysburg to Cemetery Hill. The Union was positioned in a hook-shaped fashion along Cemetery Hill and Cemetery Ridge, just ending to the north of Little Round Top. If the Confederates were able to secure these positions and push the Union back, then they would have a sure victory over the North. On July 2nd, Lee's plan was to have Commander Longstreet's 1st Corps to sneakily attack the Union's left flank around 5 p.m. and take them by surprise. Lee's plan, however, was based on faulty information, and Longstreet faced Major General Sickles' Union troops head-on. Lee attacked the Union's flanks multiple times, resulting in fighting at Devil's Den, Little Round Top, Culp's Hill, and East Cemetery Hill. Confederates were able to make a slight headway, but were unable to push the Union troops far enough to claim victory. On July 3rd, fighting raged on Culp's Hill, with the Union regaining the lost ground the previous day. That afternoon, after being bombed with massive artillery, Lee attacked the Union center on Cemetery Ridge, but was devastated by the losses during Pickett's charge. Pickett's charge was the last attack in the Battle of Gettysburg, ending the battle and leaving the Confederates with heavy losses. The total number of casualties in the Battle of Gettysburg was 20,000 to 25,000, leaving Lee with two-thirds of the size of the army he attacked with. Along with the Battle of Vicksburg, this battle is known as the turning point in the Civil War.
Even though the Confederate attempts to break through the Union lines had failed, this wasn't the last of the Confederates. Early in the morning, Lee had ridden with Longstreet's men to the top of Cemetery Ridge. Lee had wanted Longstreet's men to attack the Union army head-on, while Lee would use massive bursts of cannon fire against the Union army. James Longstreet had thought it was a terrible idea, but Lee had reminded him that the rebel army had overcome similar odds before. Although Lee had rejected, he was later convinced that the Union army would crack at any point during the battle. Afterwards, Lee had then ordered him to assemble his troops and get ready for battle while there were 3 divisions that were put in charge. During the battle, some had surrendered because the fighting was fierce up and down. There was one specific patch called land called the Devil's Den that had been extremely dangerous. This area of land had been covered with boulders while the Confederate troops pushed the Union troops back inch by inch. The Union was really desperate to hold the Union line. Hancock had later turned to the 1st Minnesota Volunteers in desperate need of help. With a small regiment of 262 men, the Minnesotans had fixed their bayonets and charged. The regiment had lost 215 men, some were dead and others wounded. Even though none of the troops had deserted, all of them had held their line until the reinforcements had come. They had continued during the night, but then the Union had snuck in and around the boulders of Devil's Den, attacking each other with bayonets. By the end of the battle, 15,000 men were left dead or left wounded. When they were searching, Meade and Lee took stock of their position, and as a result, the Union and Confederate lines had held.
The Battle of Gettysburg was a decisive victory for the Union that stopped the Confederate invasion of the North and forces Lee's army to withdraw in Virginia. Although the battle did not involve the largest number of troops, it had the highest casualties of any battle of the Civil War.
Gettysburg also became important for what happened after the battle. A ceremony was scheduled to dedicate the soldiers at the National Cemetery, where dead Union soldiers were being gathered. It was held about 1.5 months after the war started on November 19, 1863. Lincoln gave a 10-sentence speech that only lasted 2 minutes. There are no photographs because the press was shocked at how short it was. But the 10 sentences quickly became regarded as one of the greatest speeches in American history, providing guidance for the nation redefining itself in the middle of a war that threatened its very existence. Today there's a monument in the National Cemetery at Gettysburg for a Gettysburg Address.